Really excited to have our guest today, Sumitra Hall. So Sumit and Go Brand Go have been working together for since the end of last year, and so we thought this would be a great opportunity to bring him onto the Conflux webinar series to talk about people, because right now, we've got multiple things to work through and struggle through as business owners, and the underlying current all the time is people, because that's really what makes our businesses succeed, fail, grow, or stagnate. And so, one of the things that, that I know that Sumit brings a wealth of experience in his career is he, cut his teeth in leadership as being a Marine. So thank you for your service, Sumit. And then, after that, he became a COO for several different companies and led different companies through lots of growth and lots of turbulent times with lots of success. And then ultimately he found out that he wasn't supposed to be a COO. Who knew? But what he found out is that he actually, where he thrived and where he loved to spend his time was working with people, working with business owners and helping them manage their people in a way that can continue to grow, as he says, top line, bottom line, and to continue to make the business be successful. So we're excited to have Sumit on today to talk about, something that I think we've all heard so much about, from the standpoint of, since Jim Collins wrote Good to Great many, many years ago and talked about having the right people in the right seats on the right bus. And that's all good, great, and grand. And, and when I read that, 15 plus years ago, I was excited about it too. And even still today, people quote it all the time. But then the hard part comes back as you get back to the office or home office, wherever you may be. And when it comes down to like, okay, now how do you actually do that? It's the constant, consultant quandary of what versus how. When you come back to your office and say, okay, how do I do this? That's where the real struggle, I know, for me has always been. So, to me, I'd love to, how do we, as business owners, how do we make sure that we get the right people in the right seats on the right bus?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit at the end there. Can you repeat the question, Derek? I apologize.
Yeah. So as business owners, how do we get the right people in the right seats on the right bus? How do we do that? We definitely,
yeah, absolutely. So
what we should do.
Absolutely. So, the reality is that there's a level of behaviorization that every human is capable of, right? There's the ability to turn something up or down as necessary. I would say I did it for almost 15 years as a COO, and looking at the world from the process sense and the data sense, when really that was my strength. So understanding that about humans is a big part of this, the ability to behavior modify. What psychologists agree and really what we measure in culture index as well is there's a level of that, like how much behavior modification are people capable of. And when there's pressure, stress, or no one watching, people don't behavior modify. They go back to their natural state, right? And especially right now in the day of COVID and what looks like for the relatively near future, people are going to be working from home more often than not. And so the component of that nobody's watching, that's there, right? Then there's also the pressure that comes with working at home because you've got other the environmental issues that come with that. So what we're seeing more and more of, even specifically now and potentially going forward, is people's ability to be modify will be less because of the pressure that's around working from home, and then just the pandemic that's going on. Ultimately, still, like the premise for everything that we do is still around, if you manage people to their strengths instead of your own, you'll get more out of your people, right? So understanding better how people are hardwired, how are they motivated, how do they communicate, and knowing all this about your team and your employees and potentially new people coming into your organization, and then managing to that versus, hey, well, this is how I'd like to be managed, so I'm going to do the same thing, right? Very naturally, we all fall into the golden rule, which is treat other people how you want to be treated. Culture index and culture now is really about platinum rule, and it's treating other people how they want to be treated. And knowing that, the tool helps you understand that. And then my ability to translate the data into actionable items for you guys is the execution part of it.
Yeah. So culture index is, a particular software and methodology that, that we started working with you guys on, like I said, at the end of last year, and what I found interesting is I know what we struggled with as an organization is, A player, B player, C player type situation. We always found it was, fairly easy to identify and remove low performers, whether that be from a cultural perspective or a performance perspective. What we had always struggled with was how to handle I'll say the mediocre performer that has flashes of brilliance, that they inconsistently are amazing, but then they, like you said, resort back to mediocre performance at that point. How have you seen companies successfully manage to the mediocre performer in a way to either coach them up into being a high performer, A player, or to coach them out and free them up to other opportunities? What have you seen other companies do? How do you use Culture Index in a way to identify those people in organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, within the program, we measure the 7 work-related traits. A lot of that tells you the DNA of the human being, like how are they motivated, where are they best suited, the type of work they're best suited for. And so we teach you how to put people into that type of work and those types of positions, so they're consistently getting to work within their strengths, right? So understanding that if you've got a proactive, strategic human being, and you're having them do a ton of task work, that's really not their strength. Their strength is really looking forward and being proactive and in a macro level, looking at the opportunity for the organization. So the more work they do in that space, the more engaged they are. That's when that's when you see in your words, the brilliant flashes every once in a while, right? So one, getting them into work that's more in their traits, their strengths. And two, the other part is also understanding how to motivate them, right? I just gave you a scenario where someone that's strategic doesn't really like the detail stuff, but I can tie the work to their strategic thinking. Then all of a sudden I can get detail out of them as well. And so, again, the ability to manage your team effectively and efficiently is really what the program's about. Like, can you look at them from 50,000 foot view of who they are, and then how do you start building your organization of everybody gets to be who they are, right? Engaged employees. How do you get more productivity out of the people that you currently have? And to your point, there's an opportunity potentially to scale and say, listen, there's some people that just don't fit, that would fit better in other organizations, and so it's almost a transition where you help them out to get to that level as well. I can't tell you the amount of calls I've done with clients who are like, "Hey, will you spend about 30 minutes with one of my people that we're going to let them go? Can you help coach them into what they should be looking for, the type of work that they would be really good at?" And my ability to use my own story of the 15-year COO, Marine engineer, I had all the metrics for a great COO, except that didn't have the passion to be a COO. Right. So again, it took Culture Index to help me realize that. So when I talk about it, it's very passionate for me because it helped me create my new career trajectory. And I can just tell you, it's been the best ride of my life. And so when I do this with teams and clients and employees, that's the goal I want for them. I want them to experience what I experience, which is if I get to do the stuff that I love, I can knock it out of the park. And the I being the universal I, any one of us, you mentioned this earlier, there's tons of books and studies and Twitter handles and all these things about, like, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, the 8-hour work week. And we could spend the rest of the afternoon just listing books and articles, but that's what it comes down to. If you get to be who you are in your work environment, you will be that much more productive.
So that's totally true. And one of once again, the challenges that I have found, and I've seen other businesses, struggle with as well, is when you identify maybe someone who's not a great fit. They're not a bad fit, just not great. They're not, like you said, living up to that excellence all the time that they're capable, or, truth be told, like they probably want to be also. Once you identify those challenges, how have you seen companies successfully manage and transition through those changes? Because sometimes I know over the course of the history and my career of Go Brand Go, there's been times where it's not just one or two people. Oftentimes when we get kind of misaligned, it's typically several people. And so without just coming in and blowing up the whole company, how do you make those transitions successfully in a way that you can kind of like change rebuild the airplane while it's still flying? Because obviously you can't implode the whole thing while still servicing your clients. So how have you seen companies successfully make that transition and get those?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's usually one or two scenarios that's happening, right? If you ask exiting employees, and again, there's polls around this, but what's the number one reason that you quit or left or whatever? It's I think somewhere in the 70% range of like, it's always been the person managing them, not the company, not the organization, not the values. It's like they didn't get along with their manager. The manager did not effectively manage them, right? So the reason I say it's two-pronged is, one, it could just be that's the problem, right? If you look at the manager and say, okay, I've got, let's say in a large organization, as you start going through the org chart, you get down to, the fourth or fifth level, and there's a high turnover rate in one manager's department, right? And so then it comes back, is it the manager? Do they not have the DNA to manage people effectively, or do they just need the tools to manage people more effectively, right? And I can answer both questions with them, because I can look at their profile and say, okay, like this person just their management style is very direct and blunt and strict and finite and specific, and most people won't live up to their bar. I can look at the results from the Culture Index survey and say, hey, 98% of people walking this planet, the 7+ billion people in this planet, are not as detail oriented as this person. What's the bar that's now been set by that manager of what even good looks like, right? And so understanding that the manager may need to change the way they manage their teams and expectations, right? So we teach communication within the organization as well, right? So we have them effectively learn how to communicate better, understanding, okay, 98% won't live up to the manager's bar. So I either have to get as close as I can, or the manager has to level expectations, right? And then the other side of it is, that's the one approach, that it's the manager that's either potentially wrong person on the wrong bus, or, just needs to be trained up, right? They need some leadership training on how to manage more effectively. The other side of it is the scale piece, right? So in organizations that I go into, that, let's say out of a scale of 10, like, there's a bunch of 4s and 5s, right? Effective, good employees, get stuff done, but not, maybe the CEO is like, hey, I'm trying to get to 10s, right? Well, a 4 or a 5 is not going to go out and hire a 6 or a 7, especially if I bring in a 9 or a 10. Like, it'll implode the entire thing, right? Like, all of a sudden you've got like good team people, and all of a sudden I'm bringing this like catalyst into the organization that just, to your point, just exploded everything, right? But if you do the gradual scaling to even that point and say, listen, we've got a bunch of 4s and 5s, we're going to bring in a couple 6s, right? Just the ease of the transition. That'll either level set the organization, or it'll start counterbalancing, and the 4s and 5s are going to start struggling, right? So then how do we start scaling that piece? Do we bring in, do we take them out? Do we bring in other people? Do we, kind of upgrade as we go? Because ultimately, like, getting to the 8s and 9s and 10s is for every organization. That's kind of the goal, right? Like, they want A players throughout the organization. And quite candidly speaking, like, right now is that opportunity, right? The amount of talent that is currently available in the market is phenomenal. I mean, none of us have ever seen it, and this percentage of A players, right, in the entire, and they're looking for work, and those A players also know they're already looking at, hey, this is where I want to be, and so the opportunity now is just phenomenal, right?
Yeah, that is totally true, and we've seen that as we've posted a few job postings recently, and for our most recent operations manager posting, we had over 100 applications in the first 3.5 days, and the number and quality of talent in those applications were just stunning and remarkable. And it's been amazing seeing what type of talent's out there. And is there a time when it could be right person but wrong time? from the standpoint of, you talked earlier about transitioning in the sixes into bringing the fours and fives up. Is there, what is the way and the best way to look at your organization from the standpoint of what we've got, where we're going, and it could be that more of what we got isn't the right answer, but we need to have some counterbalancing as far as quality of ambition or strategy or whatever it may be. But can you talk about how can we look at our teams holistically and figure out what is the right person for right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So the reality is there's always a balance, right? It's easy to get enamored by certain traits, right? I mentioned we do 7 traits, and in certain traits stick out. You're like, oh, I want all those because they're strategic and macro and risk taking and forward thinking, and you go through all the list of all the positives of that, right? But if you had an entire organization built up of those types of humans, you've essentially built up an organization of a bunch of siloed human beings, right? Everybody's self-directed, self-motivated, selfish to get to what they want, right? So balancing your organization of bringing in some of those people to balance with the ones that want to do the work, that want to be the team players, the selfless humans, right? So finding the right balance for your organization, and then really looking at your trajectory. The CEO has got a vision, right? Whatever their vision is, every CEO that runs an organization has a vision, right? So they need to look at it from where am I taking this thing? Where am I taking this business? Is it an exit strategy? Is it that I want to scale it? Is it I want to leave a legacy? So I want to grow our brand by X percentage, right? And then looking at, well, who in your organization is going to help you get there, right? And you may or may not have those people. And I'll tell you this, a lot of times we'll find, especially in large organizations, that you've got some really good talent that's kind of hidden away because they're so far removed from the strategic team, the leadership team. They don't see what's happening at the bottom, kind of the boots on the ground, right? To use an old Marine Corps term. But with the program, you can visually just look and pull out all the people that have that opportunity. We haven't touched a lot on this, but we also measure engagement, right? Within the culture index survey, we not only tell you what the DNA of a human being is, what one of your employees, but how engaged are they? Are you using them effectively? Do they believe that you've got them in the right seat? And so we can identify flight risks. We can identify people that have potential that maybe need to be trained up. You asked earlier about how do you identify training up and how do you identify these things? And so, the ability to pull those people through and say, okay, in 10 years from now, when Derek, you and I started working together, we had this conversation. Where do you want to take this, right? What does Go Brand Go look like 5, 10, 15 years from now, right? And so understanding that this is your strategic goal for your organization, we can start now driving outcomes to that goal, right? I come across a lot of CEOs that are like, listen, I'm just trying to exit. I'm 3rd generation and I think it's awesome. And I'm minding it for the next generation, but I'm struggling to mind it because we're starting to lose market shares, right? Or we're sustained and we're stagnant, which ultimately is losing market shares, right? And so looking and saying, okay, let's get these type of players, maybe in your organization or maybe outside the organization, to get you to that next level and get you to what you're good at. Because even, every CEO has got their own vision of what they're good at as well. And so our ability to look at it from that perspective and be an advisor to you, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, every organization I've ever spoken with has their financial advisor and a legal advisor, right? It's maybe an accountant, maybe a CFO, a lawyer, or a friend, or Google Law, whatever version it is, right? They've got those two pretty much locked up, but no one's really looked at the people advisor. No one's really looked at it like, hey, well, who's going to help me strategically with my human beings, right? And that's what we're here for. That's our job, is to become your trusted advisor when it comes to making people decisions, because ultimately, and we've touched on this quite a bit now, but we believe that people are good talent is a leading indicator of P&L success, right? If you have the right people in the right seats, you'll see it in your P&L. And that's what we do. We help you identify and find those people.
That's awesome. Thanks, Meet. So, when it comes to, performance of an organization, how do they know if it's a people problem or a process problem, because that's one of the things that, we often talk about as a leadership team, is that specific dynamic, is that we work really hard to try to separate those two and not create processes for people problems. And they oftentimes are very hard to decipher which is one, because I know when in the past, when we have had people problems that we've tried to address with process, because they'll say, hey, this isn't set up right, or this isn't structured right, or I didn't get the right training, or I didn't get this, or whatever it may be. But then we bring somebody else in with the same training, with the same guidance, with the same management, and they excel. So how do you, it's somewhat easier to do retroactively, but how can we as business owners proactively identify, what's a people problem versus a process problem?
Yeah. So, part of the program, and I know we've done this exercise together now as well. Part of the program is something called the C job, right? So it stands for the culture job, or, it's an objective look at a position. So, if we're looking for a marketing director, right? Well, we take people within the organization, because you know your organization better than I do, and we get, let's say, 5 of you that know the position, that what you want in that position, to objectively answer 67 questions around the position, right? We have you 5 talk about the KPI, like what's the key performance indicator for this position. Now let's go back and do this 67 question survey. At the end of that, it gives you a profile of what does success look like in that position, right? In an ideal world, all 5 of you are on the same page, the exact same profile comes out, and we're like, okay, this is a type of human being that we want in this position, right? So looking at one objectively at the position to say what's the DNA of this human that we need in the position, right? That's step one. That essentially fixes it. Is it a people problem or a process problem? Because ultimately, if you look at your organization and say, this is what we need because of our culture, this is our culture, that will fix the other issues. Because then if it comes back, it'll be somebody, and I'll talk to you about, say, listen, this person's going to need more direction. They want, you're really good at the 40,000 foot view. This person's in the 5,000 foot view, and they need clarity of process. Like they need to have a step-by-step execution piece, right? So we create processes, one, based on the position. And then if we need to dial it back more because of the person, we now know exactly what to get, how to communicate that to the human being.
Sumit, you've talked a lot about culture, right? And brought that up multiple times, and it's in the name of the organization that you belong to. Culture is one of those nebulous words, once again, that everyone talks about: building culture and creating culture and maintaining culture and aligning the culture. What does culture mean to you, and how are you able to help coach organizations to create the type of culture that is right for them? And specifically, how have you seen companies successfully accomplish that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it is absolutely one of those words. Everyone's like, "Oh, we have the best culture. We have the best culture. We have happy hours on Wednesdays and Taco Tuesdays, and we've got a ping pong table in the break room, and we require them to take 15-minute breaks on this thing, and we've got nap pods and all this other stuff, right?" And so it's this entire picture painted around like physical things that are happening and mental health things that you're trying to provide to your people. And at the end of the day, culture is, do you have engaged people? Are people getting to be who they are at work? Are they having to not be themselves, stress themselves out, and disengage? Or like, hey, I come in and the day flies by because I get to do everything that I love to do, right? Or 85% of what I do is everything I love to do, and the 15% I can deal with now because like 85% is what I love to do, right? It's almost never about the ping pong tables and the happy hours. It's funny sometimes. It's almost comedic when companies will have core values up on the wall, and then an applicant will come and say, "Oh my God, those are my core values too," right? And it's just like I admire companies that have their core values because it's important. You got to have your core values, right? And then you want to look at that as well. But you put them on a wall and someone's like, "Oh, those are mine too," or they've done the research before they come in, and so there's such a subjectivity around hiring in what is perceived as a fun culture. There's an entire percentage of the population that honestly right now, looking at the pandemic, is like, finally I get to use my strength, which is not people, right? Like, I've been training for this my entire life. I have a friend, her dad is one of those people that is like very data focused, more of an intro than an extro type of personality. And so she asked me, she's like, Dad, how are you dealing with this social distancing? He's like, I've been trained for this my entire life. The only difference is now when I go to the grocery store, no one talks to me. Right. So like, even that was like, someone asking to help was too much communication for him. Right. So like, if you base your culture and you have, all these plans around like, this is what it's going to be for everybody, like, you're now again golden ruling it, right? You're looking at it from how you want to be treated, right? By the way, I love happy hours, right? Like, these Zoom happy hours that I've been doing have been a blast, because I've been like talking to people, and that's my strength. There's again an entire percent of the population that does not enjoy that, right? And we help you identify that. So your culture is, do you have engaged people, right? Gallup did a poll around this. Engaged employees are 70% more productive at work. That's culture, not Taco Tuesdays and potluck dinners and golf outings and all that stuff. Those are tactical things that you're trying to do. Culture is, are your people getting to be themselves? Are they engaged? That's it. That's the end of it. That's the end of that statement.
Yeah. And what I found really amazing over the years, as we've hired and had a lot of people on our team over the years, is someone who is an A player for another organization won't necessarily be a player for me at our organization. And that took me a lot of time to realize that I would read these same articles and read these same studies and hear these same speakers, and I would go out looking for these mystical A players, like thinking that they're going to have some sign around their neck that says, "Hi, I'm an A player." And it took me a long time to realize that A player is very subjective, and it depends on putting them in the right environment for them to be able to succeed. It's kind of like the old adage of, like, if you try to make a fish climb a tree type situation, that's not what fish are meant to do. So how, as an organization, should we be trying to identify, recruit, and hire A players? Because it is such a subjective thing, and it's a challenge to really know kind of who is and who's not. But what is the approach, and where have you seen companies be successful in identifying who would be an A player in their organization, and then going out and finding those people?
That's a great question. One of the exercises I do with clients initially is we'll go through and say, hey, what's your normal process when it comes to filling a position? Change the name of the company, it's almost exactly the same, right? We think of the position, we write a job ad, we post it on some website somewhere where we get all of our talent from. People apply. We look at resumes. We look at, we all have the same checkpoints. I did this too. 15 years as COO, right? How long did they stay in their last position? Are they job jumpers, right? Okay, they're not job jumpers. Okay, they're moving to the top of the pile. They've got a really good reference, a group of people that have reference. They're going to, a great cover letter, right? So then we take our stack of, let's say 100 people and narrow it down to like 20 after perusing resumes and doing all those little mental check marks and whatever we have. And then we get down to like these 20, and then we're like, okay, we're going to invite all these 20 in, and we're going to interview them, and we'll do our cool, like, step over the question, like trip them up questions. And, we've got all this thing come out, and then we'll rank them.
Spirit animal would you be?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, and then we're going to rank them, and then we're going to sit down and discuss like what we just got out of it and see what it looked like. And then the leadership team will interview them. So that entire process, and some companies like, oh, we do drug testing, and we do, background checks, and there's a little bit more testing component to it, right? That entire process is subjective, right? From the job ads that you write, to the resumes you look through, to the people that you decide to interview, to the interview. The interview is probably the most subjective part of it, right? It's like, what'd you think of that candidate? Why I liked them. Like, I thought they were great. They had really good answers, and I gave them a couple things. They knocked it out, right? It's a very subjective perspective, because one, when you interview somebody, you're literally getting the best version of a human being ever, right? Resumes, like if they have any sort of sense around them, they've hired someone to write their resume. I share my resume with people and it's amazing, and I don't even recognize the person on the resume. I'm like, that guy's great. Oh, it's me. Like it's like they've done such a good job putting everything in the really tactical execution points. It's like, oh, this looks phenomenal, right?
Resumes are like the original social media, right?
Right, exactly. Like it's all the best things I've ever done. Like, oh, did you know I was in the dean's honor roll in college 27 years ago? Like, good for you. Yeah, volunteer. Like, so resumes are subjective, interviews are subjective, and by the way, so are drug tests and background checks. Right? It's really what you got caught doing, not what you actually did. Um, so, and the amount of time, energy, effort, and money you've spent doing that process, right? So all that's balled into one space. Well, I touched on a little bit earlier with the C job, the culture job I mentioned. Well, within Culture Index, once you codify the position, say this is what we need in the organization, every applicant is stack ranked against that ideal profile, right? And then when you go in there, you're like, I only want to see these percent matches, right? So now you're objectively looking at the position because you've decided what's good in your culture, not me, right? You said this earlier, like what if just because someone's a great player for somebody else doesn't mean they'll be a great player for you? How you manage your team is still the most impactful way, right? Do they fit in your organization? Every company has a different DNA. Every CEO, every C-suite has different DNAs. And so if you try to plug and play somebody because they have a great reference, well, great, that's not you. Like your only reference should be yourself, not someone else, right? And so, and again, if they're smart, they've vetted their references. Like everyone that you call is going to be like, oh, by the way, I've also, yeah, big thumbs up. I've had a couple that absolutely did not vet their references because I've gotten some, why would they list me? Like that's a horrible person, right? And by the way, it's a job jumping thing, right? Like if you're one of those A players and you don't fit in an organization, how long are you going to sit around? Right? Like if you're one of those assertive, aggressive human beings that's like, oh, listen, everything's a challenge. I can do it. I don't care. I believe in my ego is big enough where I can do whatever I want to. I'm one of those, by the way, right? I would just go, I'll find something else, right? Yeah, exactly. And so, taking the subjectivity out of it by doing the C job to say, this is what's codified for our organization, ranking people to that C job and saying these people have at least they have the data that backs up who they are with the organization for us. Now we'll do the subjective part, right? We still want you to interview. Don't like Culture Index doesn't have a creepy dot. Like you need to talk to these people and say, okay, they are humans that we can work with and interact with, but you've narrowed down a group of applicants to a statistical percentage of like these will fit our company, this will fit our leadership team. Now let's do the interview part. Now let's do the subjective part, and make sure that they fit what we want going forward, right? So it really takes out the guesswork and the amount of time. I know, I'm sure you did the same thing, but like in the old days, like the amount of resumes I looked at, I had just folders in my Outlook at the time. I would drop them in there for positions and like, we'll keep it on file. And it was just like this crazy mess. And it was impossible you just needed quick ways to get through resumes. And so I potentially passed up a ton of A talent, because they job jumped or their cover letter was not included. Well, I was looking for a salesperson. Like, how many salespeople do you know that are meticulous, methodical, and detail oriented? Not a lot, right? And if they were, they're probably not really good at the sales component. So it's those kinds of things. Culture Index helps you objectively look at human beings and positions instead of subjectively.
You mentioned that the almost inevitably and it's a good part of the process that someone writes a job description, and we all hear like you have to have a job description and have measurements that you're trying to hold people accountable to. One of the things that that I've learned fairly recently is there's a difference between a job description and a job advertisement. The job ad is what goes out and tries to pull people in, and the job description is what you really hold them accountable to and say, this is what high performance looks like. How have you seen successful companies use that delineation and also write job advertisements to be attractive to specific types of people?
Yeah, it's again a big part of what we do when we attract talent. Again, I did this. I literally would go online and look for other companies that have posted similar job positions, and I would cut and paste stuff, and I'd use that as my job, my job description advertisement. I was like, that sounds good. I'll use that, right? I have, by the way, also had clients that didn't completely vet that process and left the name of the original organization on the cut and paste job. So really confused employees at that point, right? But again, ultimately, like looking, if you know what you're hunting for, if you know the player you're looking for, like your job ad needs to target, your advertisement needs to target that human. It shouldn't be a general, like there's positions, like, you and I've talked about this, but like there's ways of writing job advertisements that are almost offensive to a big percentage of the population, because you're looking for someone that is going to be that direct and blunt and strict and precise and finite, right? And it should scare away some other people, like, oh God, I don't want to work there. That sounds intense. Well, certain positions are really intense, and again, the opportunity is to filter out the people that don't belong with your organization. There's plenty of other companies. There's opportunities is everywhere, but it's for you. Like, what do you need, right? So writing advertisements that go out and look for that person, we train you how to do that. We'll teach it. And I know the first one we did, it was just a little bit like, whoa, wait, that's that could be a little offensive. But ultimately it was like, and by the way, like we had really good success rate with that ad, right? Some people read that and be offended by like, why would you say that? Great. We're not looking for you,
right,
for that position.
And that's what I've come to learn is the same thing about a strong culture. Is a strong culture will, like a magnet, on one side will attract very strongly, on the other side will repel very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's been our approach, is we're very transparent and vocal about who we are as an organization. And I know we translate that into our job ads as well, and say, here's exactly who we're looking for. And we typically get one or two people per job posting that something like who the F do you guys think you guys are?
Yeah.
We've now proactively put that in a lot of our job ads of, if you are thinking this, don't waste any more time. Don't read any further. Just hit back. And you're spot on that has, for the people who it resonates with, it resonates truly. And it's like we're seeing into their souls, and they feel heard and felt and seen for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I've done interviews now after CI, obviously, when I have their profiles, like I'll start the conversation with like, listen, I didn't really look at your resume. I didn't really I'm not going to call in your references. This is the conversation I want to have with you. Like, I know this is, and they're blown away, because they're like, have you been in my bugged my house? Like, are you in my, like, do you know my family, my spouse? Like, how do you know this about me? And I'll get very direct to them. I'm like, listen, you're here because you have the DNA. I need to figure out, can we do this together or not? Right. And so it changes the entire complexity, and then the opportunity when you're speaking to people like, hey, we have invested into our culture from the perspective of, we want engaged employees. We want the right people in the right seats to help drive this bus. Right. And it level sets the organization, the conversation, everything, because now you're hunting for A players. And A players are coming to you because they're like, okay, magnet, the same thing you said, right? They're attracted to that. So, and that's what every organization that's scaling is looking. They'll go back to it and say, we have the right people, right? Even the widget creators.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about the different traits of Culture Index and the assessment, and what I found fascinating the first time that I interacted with Culture Index a few years ago is when I took the test, the initial assessment, the survey, I was like, that seemed too easy to provide any results of any magnitude. And it wasn't really until, we kind of sat down and kind of talked through what my profile came back, and I was like, that's pretty spot on, that I started becoming, I would say, a believer. And, I thought it would be interesting because there's probably a lot of people out there that, one, have never heard of Culture Index, and two, have likely never gone through the process or have seen someone's profile looked at. So I thought it would be interesting. I'll put myself out there and be a little vulnerable and put my profile up and have you kind of talk through kind of what all the little dots mean, and what kind of crazy that this says that I am. So
yeah. If I'll do a little like pre up to that, but yeah, I'm happy to read back your profile. The ultimate goal of the program had always been when Culture Index was founded. Gary Wallstrom, our founder, was like, listen, there's two things I want. I want this to be the most accurate, valid program in the business, and I need it to be quick. I need executives to be able to make quick decisions and not have to do hours and hours on assessments and things like that, right? I've done those before where it's taken like a 6-hour assessment basically, and it's a 150-page report. And I was like, man, bless the executive, CEO, HR person that's got this much time to read a report on somebody.
And we used to do those. What we would do is we would go through the entire interview process and have a full battery of tests and assessments and a psychological assessment, and a psychologist would read through it. Super expensive, super time intensive. And what we found is the false positives and false negatives were almost no better than us just kind of flipping a coin to begin with.
Yeah.
What we found it helpful was when it came to managing those employees, we kind of had a better feel of their motivators and their drives and what made them tick. But as far as how do we find the right people, we found that it was no better than us just taking a wild guess at
Absolutely. And that was the thing, like for Gary, it was like, this needs to be fast, accurate, and executable. A lot of times companies invest in these programs and it ends up sitting on a shelf because it's so complicated or complex. They just like, I don't know what to do with it now. I've got my day job I still need to do. I can't be a report writer or report reader or, in this business. And so, like it takes about 7 to 10 minutes to take the assessment. It's 2 questions. It's extremely simple. And it's on purpose, and it's the most valid program that we know about out in the world, right? The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has a benchmark of 70%. Any program that's 70% or higher in validity is a valid program. We're at 90%, and I don't know if anybody else that's ahead of us in this business. So, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. But you took this 7 minutes, and I'm able to read the 2 graphs back and just say, okay, top survey traits, this is your hardwired DNA or your thumbprint. Bottom, job behavior. This is what you think you need to be successful in your current position, right? Ultimately looking at from the perspective of who you are versus what you need to be, right? The goal is for these 2 to line up, because that's when you get engagement. That's when you get right people, right seats. That's who you are is what you get to be. But you're a proactive, strategic, big picture visionary that likes to take risks, that spends time in the future, analytic, deductive. You take data and facts to come to your decision. Even your gut instincts are factual and data based. Like you're using experiential, or you're using data points to get to those decisions. You're an extremely impatient human being that you can be detailed if it ties back to your self-directed, self-motivated goals, right? So your ability to be strategic, proactive, look down the road, you can actually build some of those systems back if you need to. You're also someone that we call selectively social. You don't enjoy those happy hours that I was talking about. You go to those happy hours to say, okay, I'm looking for something. Like I'm here to either close a deal or get an opportunity or get our name out there. Whatever it is strategic. Whereas someone like me, when I go to happy hours, I'm like, hey, let's have fun. Right. So like I for my profile, I'm one of the best intangible sales profiles in the business. My ability to put words to the intangible is what sets me apart. Again, the Marine in me is there, right? You're the sniper. You go in with the purpose of like, I'm going to get this done. This is the reason I'm here. These are the people I'm going to talk to, and this is what I'm going to get the outcome of, right? You're also extremely inventive. So you're not only innovative, but you're also extremely inventive. And so your ability to see down the road, create innovation, and then be inventive within that as well, will give you the opportunity of having, and we've had these conversations, the things that are spinning off for you right now, like those are all opportunistic, right? And you're also very logical. So you're not, for better or worse, you don't have a lot of empathy, you don't have a lot of sympathy, and you don't have a lot of emotion. And the best example of that usually is like, let me ask your spouse how that sits. And they had the best accurate representation of us, right? So essentially what I've done is I basically read your top set of dots, right? We measure 7 work-related traits. They're with autonomy and social ability, pace, conformity, logic, ingenuity, and then we measure that mental stamina for the behavior modification. I want to be, and then the bottom set of dots tells me, like, are you being stressed out? Are you being pushed too much? Not enough? Where's the opportunity? Are you getting to be that strategic visionary that you want to be? Which, by the way, it wasn't the case for you. You weren't allowed to, at the time that you took this is back in August of 2019, you weren't getting to be full tilt ahead. Like, you were someone that was wanting to drive outcomes and you weren't able to drive outcomes. You were someone that was having to slow down and be a little bit nicer and manage single things instead of your ability to be looking at the world from a multiple perspective. And so all that to say, this took you 7 minutes, and I was able to translate that data within in under 10 minutes to you about this is what's happening, right? The power of the program is really understanding the dots, right? So I want to be cognizant of not spending all the time going through each of them, specifically because I want to, people that are interested, I want them to take it and have this conversation with me, because the program takes time to understand and implement, right? Like, this isn't a hey, send me a report, because then we're on the shelf again. Got a lot of stuff on the shelf, right? Then I'm on the shelf again because you're like, I got to read some reports, right? So the way the program is geared is we actually teach your leadership team on how to utilize this data in-house, right? But I'm part of the program. I'm your advisor to help you make these decisions. And quite honestly, it takes most of our clients about 5 years to stop calling us, because that at 5 years is typically the time clients are like, okay, got it. Right? There's enough people trained in the organization. They see the dots and they've already started seeing, okay, these are the single task focused people. I can't walk into their office and throw a grenade in there because that's not how they work. They approach single task, meticulous, methodical human beings. And I'm like this crazy, like everything's an opportunity person, right? So making sure that, like, we train you, but we're like I said, I'm the third leg of that stool. You've got your financial, you've got your legal. Well, I'm your people person, right? My job is to help you continually work on the model within your organization, teach your people, get you better and better and better at executing. So when it clicks for your organization, like now, like we've got clients that actually they'll have on their name tags or their doors the profile that your dots basically showing on the doors. And so you can look at it visually, like, oh, okay, I can't do that with this person, or I need to level set this conversation. So it really gets people it's funny, I can't remember the show now, but there was a show on Bravo Network. One of the spouses is a client and their dots were on their office door while they were filming, and someone sent a picture to me like, oh my God, you guys are in, you're on, I think it was like Real Housewives or something. I can't remember which one, but they were like, you guys are Real Housewife people. And I was like, I'm not, but yes, those are there. We have a lot of clients. So
That's awesome. So, you mentioned earlier that, engaged employees are 70% more productive. And we always hear the A player, B player situation. How much of a difference does having a team of the right mix of A players and B players versus settling for, I would say, for what we've got? What have you seen from a performance perspective? What is the difference it makes in organizations when you get the right mix of A players in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So private equity guys and deal guys talk about this all the time. They will invest in the right team before they will invest in a great idea, right? So if you have the right people, you automatically have a vision of, you guys can figure this out and build it and grow it and get to that point. So having the right people is literally like, the right people are the leading indicator of P&L success, right? If you got the right humans, you can grow your organization, you can pivot. I've had clients in this pandemic time completely pivot because they had the right people, right? So all of a sudden their business model went from, making widgets to like, hey, now we're doing financial planning. Like, they had the human beings and the right mix of human beings to be able to pivot and continue. I use that example of the fourth generation CEO that was like, hey, we're actually starting to manage or lose market shares. Well, the right people can see that coming and they'll already start pivoting, right? So it always comes back to, if you have the right humans in your organization, if you have the right DNA in your team, like, your ability to scale is that much easier. Your ability to grow your organization, continue to evolve, and utilize the opportunity to pivot as necessary is going to be the leading indicator of success for organizations. So it's always people.
So before I ask one more question, so and then we'll take some questions from the attendees. So if you've got a specific question you'd like Sumit to ask, put it in the Q&A right now, and we'll, after this last question, we'll get to some of those questions. So last one from me is something that, that I've always found, also kind of challenging is, like in sports, right? You've got someone who's performed at a consistently high level, and then all of a sudden they've got an off year. Like here in St. Louis, I'm a big Cardinals fan, right? So Matt Carpenter, MVP level performer for several years, and then all of a sudden he can barely break 200. At what point does loyalty to what they did and help get you where you are balanced with, okay, as an organization, we've got to get from here to there, and you may or may not have that ability to do that? Or is this just an off year? Is this maybe it's something that's going on personally, something in life, something is just, maybe it's out of misalignment. So how do you, one, understand and delineate between a bad season and a declining career? And two, how do you go about balancing the loyalty factor of, hey, they were in the trenches with me and they helped me get me here, to what's it going to take to get me to where we're going?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give an example of how this actually happened with one of my clients, right? So when we started working together, he's like, I've got the perfect team. These guys are going to be with me. They've been with me for the last 5 years. Started with nothing, and now we're here, and now we're scaling and we're growing. And I was very, very clear with them. I was like, listen, you've got 2 of your 5 leadership team. I believe we'll make it through the next 3 years. And then there's going to come a time after that maybe one of them stays, but they're not going to be able to stay with you to the next level. He's like, no, I'm loyal. I love them. They've done so much for me. And the reality wasn't that they were bad people. They're awesome people, right? The history is there, all that. But ultimately, what I was talking as we scale, and by the way, it exactly happened that way, actually faster than I expected. One of the 3, like within the first month, was like, I don't want to be here anymore, and they left. But ultimately, as we scale, because loyalty is important. I'm a Marine, like I believe in it, it's extremely important. But your loyalty is to the organization. Us as visionary CEOs, executives, our loyalty is to the organization, not a person, right? So the Cardinals example, like the loyalty is to the Cardinals. It can't be to Matt Carpenter. It can't be to pool host. It can't be to any one person, because ultimately, like, what's best for the organization, right? Now, if they have the right DNA, then maybe it's an off year, and you can find that out, right? Humans evolve. Like I talk about motivating needs. Well, one of the traits is what's self for them, what's a win for them, right? That can change over time, right? Young Sumit, a win for young Sumit was making X amount of dollars, right? Well, in his mid 40s, Sumit, now the win is,
you can go
like,
with old Sumit.
Yeah, the old Sumit now is just like money is important, but it's because I want this lifestyle for my children, right? So the win may still be the money. One, that the numbers have changed, but 2, it's really like, if I can provide for my family in the way that I want to provide, like, that's a win. So understanding, like, if they're still in that, if they have the traits of that person, are you continually to have that conversation of what's motivating them, right? That can evolve. And so us as leaders need to know that on an ongoing basis. It can't be static. If we fall in that static role, that's when we lose it. And so, to answer your question, one, loyalty has to be the organization, not the human being, right? If they have the DNA, let's do some work around, like, let's figure out, is it just an off year? But if their win has changed, by the way, I had a client that, he goes, you told me this is hardwired. Psychologists tell you this is hardwired by the age of 12. Like, I've been this way. He's like, my son committed suicide 2 years ago, right? He's like, I just don't have the same, I just don't have the same desires anymore. So he was still one of those people that needed to control outcomes and needed to win at things, but the win changed completely, right? Like, that impact of his son committing suicide, all of a sudden the big house didn't matter. It was time with his remaining children and his family. He's still hardwired to win, right? The DNA still says he needs to win, but the win just shifted exactly. And so if it's that, hopefully it's never that scenario for any of us, because I can't fathom that. But ultimately, just making sure you understand the pivot for the human being, and then getting them re-engaged. And if not, then help them transition, because you're actually being more loyal to them if you actually help them transition out of that position at that point. Like, if for the Matt Carpenter, sometimes they just need to change the scenery, and the employee doesn't want to do it themselves. right? There's an entire population that's risk averse. And so leaving the devil you know is better than one you don't. So in a way, you take away the anxiety of like, they know they're not a good fit anymore. And you're actually taking away the anxiety of saying, I'm going to help you find the next thing for yourself.
That's great. All right. So a question from one of the attendees is, what is the most important aspect of the workplace prospective employees look for?
If you ask the A players, they are like, what's in it for me, right? Most employees are like, hey, well, how do I win in this scenario, right? If you, and that's everybody, like, doesn't matter where their dots sit, like everybody's like, what's in it for me? Like, can I either be part of a team to help it grow, or can I control outcomes, right? Like their motivators may be different, but ultimately it's like, how can I be a good fit? I've never met an employee that's like, I just like job hunting. I like job jumping, right? Everybody's like, I want to find my fit. If I can just get on the right bus in the right seat, I'm there, man. Like I'm in it for the long haul, right? So it always comes back to employees are looking at employers as, is this my fit, right? The risk takers are just more apt to jump around if it's not a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we're coming up on our hour together, Sumitra, I want to be mindful and respectful of your time and appreciate you coming on board. So I want to give you the opportunity to, last parting words and wisdom, but I wanted to just say thank you for, your partnership. And, I've told you this before, you've quickly become one of my most valued partners and mentors and advisors. I blow Sumitra up all the time, every week. We're talking multiple times a week at this point. And so I just wanted to say thank you for what you brought to our organization and what, the future looks like because of your service and because of Culture Index. So with that, I'll just give you the floor to any last words of pearls of wisdom that you want to leave with everybody that's here.
That's one, thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me because I take just as much, if not more, out of our relationship than you do. Because by the way, I use you in calls that I talk to other advisors. I'm like, this is what you get when you've got the the out of the box but inventive and innovative. So it's always a pleasure for me to have clients that are interested in this, right? My pearls of wisdom or my words of wisdom will always come back to the same thing. I do this work because I'm very passionate about it. I shared with you my trajectory. I lived in Chicago before moving down to Memphis. And I was at the end of my career as a COO. I didn't know it at the time that I was on my way out of the COO business completely. But I remember having a conversation with my wife that if I don't leave, I'm going to die in my COO chair, basically, right? And so we did a complete overhaul of our life. We moved, I quit my job and I started consulting and doing other things. And she got pregnant and we didn't have a house and income or any of that stuff. Culture Index came to me in a time that was just unbelievably phenomenal for me, and it completely changed the way I looked at the world and my work. And so my goal is always to help other people find their goal and their vision and their opportunity and their strength, because I'm deeply passionate about this, because it literally saved my life by just getting in the right bus in the right seat. And if I can do that for other people, then I've done more than I've taken. So I will always be grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, if anybody after watching this today is interested in learning more about Culture Index, where could they learn more?
So the easy one is if you guys just want to, reach out to me. There's a link in that we just posted down there. If anyone's interested in taking the Culture Index assessment, take it. Shoot us a text or an email. If you take the survey, I'll see it. I will reach out to you. We can have a conversation. Anything I can do to help. That's what my initial goal is always. How can I help? And then if there's a relationship to be had after that, I'm happy to figure that out.
Fantastic. Well, Sumit, thanks, and have an awesome day. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Bye, everybody.